skill I should have.
Well, the important thing is you have to run the app locally on your machine. You can't be running in a browser. And you have to record it to your local hard drive.
Okay.
I'm going to record. Okay, I can record to this computer.
Recording in progress.
I have no idea where it's going, but supposedly Jen McGrath is taking care of it. But we'll see.
Well, we'll have two recordings, and again,
Right.
it's a useful skill. Okay. It is now 9 o'clock, and I want to call the meeting to order. We have a passel of past minutes to review. So why don't we get at it? And unfortunately, I've got to reload them all because my computer somehow, oh, I know, it didn't update and reboot it overnight. One moment. Let me see. So we start with 227.
No, I think the agenda is listed wrong, Bob. I think it's April something.
Okay.
No, it's February 27th and April 17th.
And then there's May 1st.
Right.
Yeah, so
Yes.
yeah, February 27th is the one that's been around for a while.
That is the one where, if I'm not mistaken, there was a correction to kind of an extensive correction to John's communications regarding Comcast. And have those been made? I see a number of highlights in the version that I have. I don't have it up, but
Yeah, what happened was that I did update the minutes to more or less to say that all those long, extensive notes, the minute to minute conversations are going to be an addendum or an appendix rather than folded into the minutes, because that would make the minutes like 8 pages long and nobody's going to read it. But as an addendum, it's there as evidence.
okay. Has that been done, or is there a
Yes,
version? Okay. Um,
I sent that out last Wednesday.
that was last Wednesday. I have
Yeah.
the meetings from the minutes from May 1st.
Why is this not?
Yeah, and April 17th came out on Wednesday.
April 17th. I must have missed that.
That one
Okay.
came out on Wednesday. April 30th.
Why don't you put them up, Wendy? Do we have to take attendance technically, Bob?
Yes, I will do that.
Okay.
All right, let me see if I can get him up here. I'm having
While
just
you're
for
doing that,
information.
okay. Present are me, Bob Dwyer, Chair, Jed Johnson, Vice Chair, Wendy Howland, Clerk, and members John Frank and Brian McCarter. So we have a full house of all of the active members. I note for anybody watching on TV that we do have two vacancies. Should anybody want to join this fun? And I note also that we are live on Bourne Community TV, also being recorded by Bourne Community TV, which will be up on YouTube very quickly and efficiently. And thank you to Jen McGrail and staff for taking care of that. Okay. We note that our sponsor, Anne Marie Sarunian, is not present today. And we, as always, would welcome her advice. And I am going to, because I can't bring that up and I missed it completely. I am going to defer to. I'm going to abstain on voting on that particular set of minutes. But does anybody else have comments on it?
No, Wendy and I worked on it extensively, and she, I think, has competently included all the ins and outs of those meetings, the phone calls I had with both the representative from Massachusetts, Gable, and from the Comcast. So that's all that was basically relating all that information and how it happened and how I passed along various contacts.
I'm trying to find where the fuck that is. What was the date of that? That was
It's February 27th, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, February 27th.
Yeah, what I'm trying to find is the most recent iteration of that.
Given that we made turned over the helm on this pretty much to John and Wendy to make those and those changes only, I am comfortable at least with calling for a vote to approve these without actually having gone through it line by line, which I have not done. Is anybody uncomfortable with that?
I'm fine with that if John's fine with that.
I'm fine with it.
Okay,
Bravo. Okay, so
very good.
all I have to do is find them in here, and here we are. I found them. Do you
Okay,
want
well, you
Do you
don't have to
want
bring them up right now.
Okay,
I
good.
think what I'm going to do is go around the table. John,
Aye.
Wendy,
Aye.
Jed,
Aye.
and Brian.
Aye.
Okay, we're done with that.
Did we say what the motion was for?
Oh,
To
To
approve the
approve?
sorry
minutes.
about that. That was to approve these without going through
February
them on the
27th.
screen again.
Right.
Yeah,
Trusting
we already looked at them, less those comment edits before.
Right.
So yeah, we've already been through this line by line.
exactly.
Yes.
That's I should have made
And
that
I just
official for the
edited
record.
Wendy's comments to get the dates and times right. They were a little out of order, which is probably my fault because there was a lot going on and it was difficult to explain.
Yeah, it was pretty entertaining,
Yeah.
but
So I guess it's just a straight motion to approve these.
yes.
Yes, exactly. I should have let's do this again because I did not get a motion and a second. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from February 27th as amended?
So moved.
Wendy moves.
Second.
Second.
John seconds. Okay, going around the table. John,
Aye.
Wendy,
Aye.
Jed,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
and the chair abstain. Well, knowing that these have been made, the chair votes aye. Okay, so that passes unanimously. Um, the next is our minutes from March 13th. Is that correct?
April 17th is what I have on the agenda.
April 17th, yes.
April 17th. One moment. I apologize here.
I can put that up on screen if you want it.
Yes, if you could.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Okay, to share. Come on. Everybody seeing that?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, let me put that back up. Ready for the next page?
Anyone have any comments? When I read them, I did not.
No, I'm fine with them.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve those.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Okay. Who was that? That was
John.
John.
Yes.
Okay. And I didn't hear the second, but I heard one in there. I couldn't distinguish it. I'm going to call for a roll call vote. Wendy,
Aye.
Jed,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Chair Bob votes aye. So that passes unanimously.
It was John who seconded. I heard it.
Okay.
Wendy moved and John seconded.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay. The next that we have, and I guess these are in the next is we have the May 1st meeting.
Yep.
One more.
There we go. I'm just trying to clean things up here. All right. You go away. Go away. Let's try that again. All right. Now you can go away too. All right. You want which ones? May 1st?
This is the minutes for May
May
1st.
May 1st coming at you.
Okay.
Okay. Now let's see if I can get my control to share it again because that's disappeared.
No, we're still sharing. I'm looking at your computer.
Well, I understand that, but I'm looking for the thing that allows me to choose which one to
Oh,
share.
right.
Yeah, Christ, I hate this. All right, it's in here somewhere.
Well, that's 5-1 right there. Oh.
Oops. Okay, we're trying to, what? No, that's not what I want.
You're sharing 5-1 at the moment.
Well, all right then, we're happy.
I had no comments on it. Anyone else?
I'm fine with them.
Okay. Again, I will entertain a motion to approve these.
So moved.
Wendy moves.
Second,
Okay. John seconds. Okay. Wendy,
I
John,
Aye.
Jed,
aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Bob, Chair. Aye. So those are approved unanimously. Okay. Let me get back to the agenda here.
okay. Let that go away. Okay, so are we done with sharing? I hope.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Awesome.
Okay. Since Anne Marie is here, there is no public correspondence, which is item 3 on the agenda. For anyone who's watching on TV and picked this up from the Bourne calendar. By the way, for anyone watching on TV, as with all public meetings, the Bourne town calendar has the date and time for our meetings, and if you click on that, you can get to the agenda and any attached information that might be attached. So with that, we'll go forward from where we have been talking for months and months. This is old and ongoing business. Item A is bead and gap funding.
Yeah, I
Okay.
guess before we go on, I think it may be a good idea to Wendy to stop sharing, so it's
I thought I
easier.
did that. I'm
Oh, wait,
sorry.
wait.
We see your
Well,
desktop.
somebody's sharing.
That
Yeah.
would be probably be me. How do I turn this off? Go off. Go away.
I think you have to kill Acrobat.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea. Acrobat sucks. Always does that. I don't want to. It doesn't want to go away. All right, let's try it again. We're gonna force quit it, and that will make my life easier. Go away.
There you
All
go.
right.
Okay. Anytime I have any problems with my computer, it's always from Acrobat.
Yours is a Mac, correct?
Yeah,
Um,
it
I
just
think
doesn't like that version.
I think that goes back years, decades ago. There was a feud between Steve Jobs and Larry Ellison. So,
Yeah,
um,
and we're still
and
paying the price.
amen.
All right. We all set now?
Okay, Bob, bead and gap funding, go ahead.
Bead and gap funding. Um, we did have Jed and I had a meeting along with Anne Marie, MJ Saronian, and Marlene McCollum with let's see, Michael Baldino, um, Jody Jones from MBI, as well as Mike Galla and two regional vice presidents for Comcast. And I don't have their names quite at hand. I did not memorialize that, and I actually I was instructed not to by
Really?
by MJ. Um, said this
Okay.
that there's no reason to write that down. We'll wait and see what Comcast delivers in terms of their if they deliver anything in terms of promises in writing.
I think what we can say, Bob, is that one of them was Mike Gallo's boss. He was he was like regional or senior vice president of government affairs for New England. And the other was a woman who is basically the liaison between Comcast and MBI.
So can I
See,
list their titles?
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay,
forget.
so
He was
tell me
also a
again.
vice president. They're both in the same, it's government affairs department at Comcast. One of them was the New England vice president. The other was the liaison to MBI. And then we had Mike Gallo, who's the local government affairs representative to Bourne.
Can we just, for the record, clarify what the date of the meeting was, just so it's in the minutes?
May 1st.
Okay.
Okay. All righty.
okay, everybody got that?
Yep, thank you.
Um, the gist of the meeting was that we went through again what we had put in as conditions in the letter of support that dates from December 2023 for the uh, our thought was that that was a letter of support for the first GAP grant and maybe GAP grant only. At least that was my assumption. Clearly, that was not correct. Um, they used that for GAP 2 also. Um, and once again, for the record, they also approached Bourne for a letter of support for a bead grant, and the on our recommendation, the select board declined to give that letter of support, and that plus that engendered the meeting. There was the letter that we drafted to Comcast was never sent. Um, Marlene called Mike Galla and asked for the meeting and presented, as I understand it, a summary of what we had put in the letter. I don't know exactly how detailed that summary was, but it did precipitate a meeting with MBI, who brought the Comcast people in, who we presented that we were looking to we needed to upgrade the entire town. MJ was reasonably specific about that, and then left it to us to get into kind of the technical details of it. Um, Again, the 1.8 gigahertz spectrum, I won't say was an item of contention, but Jed, they came back and Jed, would you describe, the technology here better than I, what they offered and how that compares to what they deliver elsewhere?
Right. So they came back. They said basically they're rolling out a four it's a DOCSIS 4.0, 1.2 gigahertz full duplex using something called digital advanced architecture. Um, so that technology delivers 10 gig down and 6 gig up when you're using DOCSIS 4 modems, and it's 2 gig up and 10 gig down with DOCSIS 3 modems. That's basically the technology they have proposed for Falmouth and Mashpee. And what someone who works for Comcast told me is they've already started rolling it out in Wareham. So
It's
because
only
it's
doing
full,
2 down though, and it's the way the configuration that they're deploying it though.
well, that's in the context of next year. That was another conversation separately. The technology they're rolling out is 6 gig up, 10 gig down, and it's going to be rolled out town-wide. What we couldn't get from them was when, basically. The only when that they would commit to is the 1,400 broadband service locations that are part of the GAP and BEAD funding. What they said is that those locations will all get DOCSIS 4 by the end of next year, and that's the 2 gig. 2 gig down is the minimum that those 1,400 locations will have in place by the end of next year.
It's
What was
effectively
the
what was
upload
in
on?
their grant application. So it's
Correct.
no different than what was in the grant application that
Correct.
we weren't happy
Yeah.
with. Because
Yeah.
it's not,
So basically, they said that their plan is to enable the full technology town-wide, but they weren't going to go on the record as to when they would get beyond the 1,400 locations and when they would exceed the 2 gig down.
mm. Yeah, that
Gal
was
is
always the
bought.
concern because an upgrade is nice, but this was the incremental one as opposed to the one that required the whole kit and caboodle in order and more future proof. So they were
Well, this is probably the last that they're ever going to do. I mean,
yeah.
so the part of what they're using is something called digital advanced architecture, where they're going to take the bottom half of the DOCSIS router and push it out into the fiber node. And so what that'll let them do is at that point they can, so the backside of the fiber node is all IP over fiber. So it looks the
Hmm.
same as if you had a PON there on the other side. So you can either put PON or DOCSIS on the
Hmm.
downstream side.
Yeah.
And then, so basically that could be an OLT in there, or an ONT, and with the fiber node running DOCSIS. So it sets them up to go to all fiber if they decided to. That's the idea. And it's full duplex. The biggest thing I think that we learned there was that they're going to enable full duplex. So that means the full 1.2 gigahertz spectrum is available for upstream bandwidth, and that's what gets into the 6 gig up potentially.
Right. But what was the current thing? Was because originally I thought from what Bob told me over the phone, it was going to be 1 gig, and now I'm reading it's 200 megabytes.
So
Megabytes.
that's for next year
Yeah.
for the 1400 BSLs. They're committed to doing that by the end of 2026.
Okay, 2 gig down and 200 up, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's the minimum.
That's to
I should say that's the minimum top end speed those 1400 locations will have by the end of 2026.
Okay. So it's only for those 1400. Okay.
Yeah, what
And
the
so
vice
part of
president said though was that these 1400 are relatively deep within Bourne, off of their call it a backbone, and and he said, if we Comcast are penetrating deep into Bourne with a higher level of service, it makes sense to serve everybody who isn't among the 1400 all the way back to the backbone at that level of service.
So their backbone's going to be the same as everybody running down the highway. So that means any upgrade is only really going to affect the surrounding area. And so it's not going to go to across the canal. It's not going to be Sagamore Beach and Sagamore area because they're coming off the fiber coming down the highway. So
It's
do
hard
they?
to know. I mean, everything goes back to Borndale Road and then into Plymouth for the whole town. So what we don't know is how fat those pipes are.
Hmm.
You're right. I mean, and to me, that's the unknown is how much bandwidth that they start to provide in that section of the network so that they could provide those speeds. But yeah, they weren't going to go on record beyond 200 by 2.
Yeah, so the thing to remember too is because it's, the technology can do one thing in the lab, the way they field deploy it, and, in actuality, it's another. And so that's why we're saying, they're only going to commit to 2 gig down and 200 up. That's kind of not quite as impressive as, 10 gigs now.
Right, of course, right. But to be clear, they're committing to that for 1400 locations for next year. I mean, they were very specific about how they drew a circle around their commitment. They wanted to, because that's basically a project that they're launching within Comcast that they're committed to completing. Anything beyond that, I think, is all going to be driven by competitive situations.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think competition drives it because that's what's happening in Falmouth. Without grant money, they're having to do this upgrade. So,
Yeah.
they do it because they have to. And so here they're doing it if they're contractually obligated to.
Yeah, but I think, what Verizon's 300 symmetrical now, all the way up to Clay Pond. So once they get beyond that, I think it's going to continue to drive them to do that.
So let me
The
get straight. I
Go ahead,
didn't
John.
originally my impression was that this was going to be, from what Bob told me, a town-wide upgrade by the end of 2026. Now what you're saying is they're only promising the 1400 feet or gap locations.
Correct. Yeah.
They said their intent was to roll this out townwide. Their obligation under the I guess it's the GAP grant, with the money that they get, is to make sure that the 1,400 plus the other 18 or so are fully served per the terms of their GAP grant. But having said that, they will have to do an upgrade to a lot of the technology to reach those houses. And the vice president says it doesn't make sense for them to just pass those others without very soon after or during the process hooking those folks up or offering or adding the service to their customers that they have there already.
I think they
Um,
didn't take into account the geography that, we're split into four chunks and it's effectively four separate, chunks of the network that are all operating, other than coming back to the same transit back to Boston. They're kind of separate pieces. So
Well, no, I mean, right now, all the DOCSIS routers are in Bournedale for the whole town. So I don't see how they run part of the town on DOCSIS 4 and part of the town not on DOCSIS 4. That's going to be, I think, more work for them than just running DOCSIS 4 everywhere.
Jed, just to clarify, switching from DOCSIS 3 to DOCSIS 4, if they've got with this new technology, if they've got much of DOCSIS running in the cloud, they can emulate DOCSIS 4 with the current hardware at the end of everybody's that's in everybody's homes, right?
Well, a better way to say is that it's backwards compatible. So it's
yeah,
backwards compatible to DOCSIS 3.1. So even though they upgrade the network to DOCSIS 4, the modems will run in a compatibility mode. So you have to have at least a DOCSIS 3.1 modem. I don't know if that's a town-wide thing right now.
it's part of the reason why they like doing this 1.2, because it's more backwards compatible with the existing stuff. So they love it
Right.
because they don't have to roll out, they don't have to go to every single house and make it perfect to roll out an incremental upgrade, versus 1.8, they have to go to every single house, upgrade every single modem, upgrade every single connection, the whole kit and caboodle, and make it perfect, or it won't work.
And
Well,
Jed, per your research, they do not offer 1.8 anywhere in
Right.
their service area, right?
Right. So Comcast back in September, they came out and made a public release that they're just going to roll out DOCSIS 4 over 1.2 with full duplex. I think the thing that happened is that the full duplex worked, and they also noted the extra upstream capacity in this particular configuration, and the upstream is growing faster. Upstream demand is growing faster than downstream demand, so they've decided to go this road, and that's basically what they're doing in Falmouth and Mashpee.
They
right.
did some tests on the 1.8, and it's basically for financial reasons they're doing the 1.2 everywhere.
I think from what I understand, and Jed was very instrumental in pointing me to a couple of resources. This is kind of can I put this? It's a downgraded version. What they're doing is they're making something more or less DOCSIS 4 spec wise, but it'll work with DOCSIS 3.1 technology. It's more of a modification than a full upgrade. So they're definitely, I mean, improving. I mean, I would right now, and I have their extended higher speed service. I'm getting 40 up. Okay, and I do know that if you buy their modem, you might be able to get a little bit more. But 200 up is a nice improvement. Though we would all like to see 1 gig bi-directional. But it is an improvement. It's not full DOCSIS 4 by a long shot. It's what it allows them to minimize the amount of hardware change they have to do to make it work.
Just a question for everybody. Does anyone know exactly what they are doing for hardware improvements and service offerings in Wareham? Because I
It's
have
the
one.
same. They're rolling this 2 gig down, 200 up to everybody, and that's all they're committing to. That's what's in everyone's grants. They essentially cut for the gap grants. They did the same thing for every town. The only thing that changed was the number of locations, the miles, the route map, but it was the same tech.
Yep.
Okay, just one
That's
data
what I
point
understand.
from me is I did note in a a lot next to a business right across the Cohasset Narrows Bridge in Wareham, that there were huge spools of Comcast labeled and Xfinity labeled one cable and number two fiber, that they were there for rolling out. I mean, I've never seen a shielded single conductor coax cable that was like 5/8 of an inch thick. So they
Yeah,
were
they have to, so in order to do any upgrade, it requires putting fiber deeper into the network, because as Jed said, coming into the back of the local node is fiber. So just like when we described the PON technology, they have to have a backhaul fiber to support the splitting device. And so they have to get fiber deeper in the network. They might be running in some places a combined coax fiber and, just put one wire up and have everything they need to do whatever they're doing. So that could be it. Or it could just be a next generation
Well, if it's
cable. It's
coax,
fat.
it's not going to be fiber. It's going to be RF, but it's going to be at 5/8 inch. It's a fat cable.
Hmm.
It'll handle the higher frequencies with much lower loss, which would be probably what they're aiming for right now. And then the way they do this, I mean, Jed knows when they just tap off that cable as it goes, makes a main run.
That's
And
more likely, yeah, that they probably have them separate cables. Not impossible to put them together, but it's more likely, a big separate fat next generation cable.
yeah, they handle the RF part of it. Then the fiber part of it, I'm not really sure exactly. I've been studying a little bit about the distributed architecture, and it's rather interesting. But they're basically kind of decentralizing. What they do is that basically the way to describe it, Jed, where they're offloading some of the administration of the network electronically is to spread out a bunch of nodes rather than in one central location.
Yeah.
And it allows the modems to be much more efficient because they're not also having to be involved with it. So you have
Right.
all that overhead that you can now use, including the what they call FDX, a frequency that was only used for download can now also be used for upload.
Right.
So you're now creating essentially you're squeezing more bandwidth out of the same situation. That's why I said it's more of a modification than it is. It's like not, it's instead of, it's like putting if you were rebuilding an old car, it's like maybe putting in a dual carburetor rather than, changing the whole thing over to fuel injection. It's an improvement. It's not going all the way, but I mean, I did, my old Verizon up in Natick was at 200 bidirectional and it worked. So, I mean, 200 is a big jump from what they've got now in terms of upload speed. What they're, I have no idea what the ping times are going to be, and hopefully for those people that are gamers, it'll be vastly improved. I don't know that, what that is going to be yet, and I don't know if they're I hear it's good, but I haven't seen anything definitive yet.
I think what's important is when we wrote the letter, we were only thinking this is 20 locations, and basically, we didn't want the gap grant unless the technology was going to be, the best that can be, and otherwise just move on and let's wait for bidders under other gap bidders that would do full 10 gig fiber or someone under BEAD. And so what it's sounding like is we're getting an upgrade, but maybe not the be all and end all we were looking for here in order to bypass getting another competitive bidder to come in and do a fiber or other high speed technology.
Well, certainly, yeah, fiber would be, much more capable of giving us what we were asking about. This system, were they to do a full upgrade, I'm sure they could, as Jed said, the equipment that's at either end is capable of it, but what's in between probably isn't.
Again, so the technology they're rolling out can do 10 gig down. The question is going to be whether they decide to roll out the equipment around the technology, and that's, I think, is going to be driven by competition.
Have they actually achieved 10 with their full high def outside of the lab? Because I thought Comcast
Just-
field deployment couldn't get to 10 with this setup. I think they were capping at like 8 at best.
Well, I think it's all got, it can do, maybe they don't have one in the wild that does 10, but certainly the specification will let you get to 10. It's probably more around the actual deployments.
Right.
It may well be again if DOCSIS 4 is hardware dependent at the end of the line for customers. It may be, for gamers, they say, hey, you want faster speed gaming? We can give you DOCSIS 4. Just rent a better modem for us or buy a better modem
right?
and pay for extra service. You want more, pay more. And that would not surprise me at all. Um, the other thing to watch is what the uptake of uh, FiOS is from Monument Beach North. And talking to the head of the Monument Beach Association, she says she's talked to a number of their members who have installed it and are happy with it. So I don't know what the rate of uptake will be. It might increase in the summer as more of the summer people come back.
Right.
So I'll try to keep track of that, but I don't have numbers, nor does she.
So, Bob, there was another item of discussion. It had to do with the 10 or so community anchor institutions that some got dropped. And there was going to be some follow-up about making sure that everything was covered. I
Well,
lost track of what happened with that.
uh, I think part of that is they have declared or identified Open Cape as a winner of some BEAD funding, primarily to get out to the Bassett Island locations. And I thought they were going to, as they start this, they were going to revisit those. And we offered, in any case, to assist with ground truth. We can tell them exactly what the CAI was, what the address was, and that went for any of the other unserved locations that they said, well, that's a garage or something like that. We said,
Okay.
we may differ. We during the course of the next year, we will trace that down for them.
And if
We already did that during BEAD. So who was trying to deny locations? Because I already painstakingly went through those
All of that.
locations.
Yeah.
Well, that was an assertion made by Baldino, right, Jed?
yes,
That yeah, that they stood by the corrected list.
yeah, but
We
Uh,
were
we were
who's
open to us
corrected
correcting the corrected list,
who's
right.
corrected lists though? Are they saying of the CAIs or the BSLs?
the CAIs.
And they're called which CAI did they call a shack?
I didn't hear that specifically. I just heard them say that they had corrected the list of some kind.
Oh,
Baldino said some of the ones that they did an initial review on prior to giving the grant for the four locations, I guess it was for the $24,000, was that the other ones appeared from what they had seen to be non-serviceable locations
oh, so they're just talking about the BSLs under GAP.
under GAP, right?
Yeah, so
Um,
I that's a mistake because MBI has drone photos of some of these locations with pictures of the actual houses that I had submitted to them. So um, and other providers bid in GAP for those locations as serviceable. So that is essentially parroting Comcast uh, via via Baldino. So I think that's an incorrect statement, and we're going to need to address it.
we can pursue that when we re-examine the lists, and then frankly keep an eye on exactly what Comcast is serving over the next year. I'll get to that further down in the agenda in terms of a way forward.
So are they
Well,
willing to
so
give us,
so
Bob,
but that
anything
means
in
under
writing?
GAP, that means they're saying that means MBI agrees with Comcast's position that they're not serviceable BSLs under GAP. So how is that's gonna make a mess?
Okay, well, I think what we need to do is re-examine the list of both the BSLs and the CAIs, compare what we submitted with what they contend, and then just send corrections. Keep going back to Cornell with corrections, and they're going to use that get that information to price the Comcast uh, uh, proposal, I guess, a revised proposal. Again, it's so loose in terms of the funding here, my inference is it's so loose in terms of funding within MBI that if new locations that are gap eligible are put back on the list, MBI can just say, "Oh, sure, okay, here, have X dollars for that particular location." And I think perhaps that will be is what we ought to pursue.
So there would be two. There'd only be two categories of gap locations that would move to BEAD. You're going to have, sorry, three. Let me make it three categories. There are let's just start with the 1,800 locations that should have been under BEAD that MBI moved to GAP, which would then get moved back to BEAD. And we're all familiar with why those exist and all that. And so that remains with two other categories. You got the 16 original GAP locations, two of which are getting picked up by Open Cape due to very complex things around ultra high cost locations probably getting shoved aside and them ending up in BEAD. But as you're saying, as you just said in the meeting, MBI is stating that Open Cape's going to get those. So those two go to Open Cape. The two of those locations were in Comcast's non-eligible list of like 10 to 12. And so that was 10 or so. We're going to have to pay really close attention to what happened to them because I've reviewed each one of those BSLs and they're all eligible structures. So any assertion that they're not is false. The other couple of them were the ones that Comcast tentatively were awarded under GAP. So in theory, were we to recommend to the select board that they reject this offer since it is no different than in the GAP application, all of these should shift back to MBI to at this point assign to someone else, since any future winnings are direct negotiations with MBI, since BEAD is now a direct negotiation process and/or defaults to the existing GAP bidders, of which there was only one other for Bourne.
Brian, I do not see how if we identify misclassified locations and alert MBI to them again, how MBI will do anything but give this to Comcast. Maybe.
Why would they give it to Comcast if we just withdraw the support for the grant for under GAP?
Well, let's move on to that. I mean, you drafted a letter. Has everyone seen that letter? Since I'm going to rule this as
Yeah.
definitely under BEAD and GAP funding. Um, and that's one of the options that's listed in your letter. Excuse me, I'm going to start to sneeze. I'm in hay fever hell here. Apologies. I muted as much of that as I could. Um, I again, shall I does everybody have that letter? Can anybody bring it up just so anybody on TV can read it? Not that you can read anything on the low definition VCTV until Comcast comes through with their upgrade. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, the implication here and the if can Wendy, can you bring that up or somebody
Oh,
who has?
let me see if I have it here.
I've
I
got
do.
again, I'm just because of bandwidth and other problems.
Stand by.
Okay, I may be able to do it, although my machine is now running a little slower than usual because it's recording, but let's see if I can.
No, I think I have it here. Just
Okay.
stand by. Yeah, that's not it. Here we are. I believe, let's see. No, that's not it. Here we go. That's not it.
I can do it, I think. Let me see. I think this is it. There it is.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, has everybody read this?
Yes.
Anybody need a second? It's only 3 paragraphs.
Okay. I'll stop it now. There we go.
Okay. Again, I presume Brian submitted this, and I presume you, Brian, that is an implicit motion that we accept this and send this to the select board for their consideration.
The question is, do we need to edit some lines? Do we maybe the last sentence is really, do we need to edit it slightly to get it accurate?
Well, the last sentence of the first paragraph should say 6 gig, 10 gig down, 6 gig up.
I don't agree because Comcast press releases haven't achieved 10 gig with
So it would say 8 then. So it's 8 gig down and 6 gig up.
so that we got to make the distinction that the modem at the head of the network and what can reach the homes is different. So they're only deploying it out to 2 gig down and 200 up. So that's
But
all
that's
they've
only,
committed to.
but you're saying here the proposed technology, not the proposed project. The technology
Okay.
itself can do, I mean, it's specified to do 10 down.
So they had a dust up with one of the. I'm gonna go dig it up, but they had to stop saying it was 10 capable because they couldn't prove it with how they were deploying it.
I guess, but I mean, if you go to the Cable Labs website, which is the owner of the specification, they'll tell you it's a 10 gig down technology, 6 gig up. I mean, that's how the spec reads on Cable Labs website.
I'll have to dig it up. I found something more recent where they had a dust up. I think it was with Cable Labs that the way they did it could only go to like 8. But
Oh,
so
we'll
then we
say
need to
8 to
clarify.
10. So it's
So we
8
need
to
to
10 down and 6 gig up.
So we need to clarify that part of the equipment is 886, but the way they are deploying it to residents of Bourne is only 2 by 200.
Right, but that's two different things. So
One is the technology, and the other is
correct.
compliance with the proposal for the terms of the BEAD or GAP grant funding, right?
Correct. Right.
Well, so the real world, how it's going to affect people real world matters. So, if they're only committing to 2 by 200,
For next year for 1,400 locations. They said on the call they fully intend to go to more locations and higher speeds, but they weren't going to put a date on it.
yeah. So, my view here is we're just, this is a consolation prize versus, next generation stuff now that is ready now and or a competitive provider. So, we got to make it clear what we're offering doesn't match up with the intent of the original support letter.
It's not identical, but if you go to Cable Labs and you read what they're saying on their with their specifications, what Comcast is proposing is the most advanced technology available for cable systems.
That Comcast is widely deploying now. I think it's not the most advanced technology available for cable systems. It's just the one that they're using.
No, it is. Go to Cable Labs. They'll tell you DOCSIS 4 with distributed advanced architecture, that's the most advanced specification available from Cable Labs.
So then
One moment, I've
why
got
are we
to step
getting
away,
2
making
gig
sure.
down and 200 up then?
Because to me, it's all about the backside, right? They're not delivering enough bandwidth into the backside of their network to commit. Again, that's the minimum that they're offering. They're not saying that that's the most that you're ever going to see. That's the minimum you're going to see in 2026.
Does this level of specificity have to be in this particular letter? Is it enough for the select board to say, this isn't what we agreed to, this is not acceptable, and not get it too deep into the weeds and the specifics until they come back and respond?
I would agree with that approach because it's like the details here are going to confuse the issue that overall, this isn't the kind of upgrade we were hoping for.
Yeah.
I think
And-
we're getting a better upgrade than we asked for.
But it may
You-
not be as good as we were supposed to be getting.
Well,
I think it's better.
well,
That's my argument. We're
well,
getting 1.2 gig wide of spectrum for upstream. That's 3 times more than what we had asked for.
we'd asked for 1.8 that has been field tested to higher speeds than the FDX. So like, I'm not sure why you're
upstream.
saying it's faster.
Not upstream.
I sent the links out a few weeks ago.
Yeah, the upstream could only go to 2 gig. And that's with the high splits.
Hold on, let me find it.
The reason I ask is that if we submit this to the select board, their eyes are going to cross if it's too technical. It may be sufficient for them to say, this isn't what we were asking for originally. And, if this is a negotiation, then we're coming back and saying, this is not acceptable. What else have you got?
I have another perspective on this,
Okay.
just in terms of having had conversations with 4 different select board members in the last couple of weeks about this. Um, uh, you know, uh, in terms of them taking this up again, and trying to get more from MBI. My perspective is that none of the select board members, or at least the 4 I talked to, think that they or the town has the kind of the mental bandwidth to deal with this right now. They are right now I won't say panicking, but they are extremely concerned because the appropriation to fix the failing roof on the brand new police station before they get compensation from insurance or from bonding or from the contractor, et cetera. Um, in addition to the other immediate financial commitments they have, they're spending all of their time trying to deal with those, moving numbers around on a spreadsheet, and my guess is that they basically will table this indefinitely. At the best, we'll get a polite "thank you very much for your recommendation. We don't have time to deal with this right now. Go away." To be
Well, the
honest.
alternative, we've been advocating for months that this letter with support be withdrawn. The right thing is for a second competitor to come in so that there's competitive pressure to solve this problem forever. So, the support letter, the terms of the original support letter aren't being met. It's arguable what they're putting in, whether it's better in some ways, worse in others, doesn't really matter. But the conditions aren't being met, and if we shouldn't taking a deal that isn't optimal puts us in a worse position than no deal at all because it blocks the locations from all future federal grants. So if the town doesn't have the capacity to deal with this, they should just simply withdraw support and move on and let the chips fall where they may, but not block the locations from future funds.
Brian, can you revise this letter to state exactly that? That
Uh,
basically the last paragraph. If the town, if the select board doesn't feel like pushing this forward to get the best technology under the existing grant, then withdraw the letter of support and let I guess free market competition determine exactly what upgrades get put into the whole town, the same way I guess Falmouth is operating.
that could be
How's that? How's Falmouth operating, Bob?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, did Falmouth get a gap grant? I don't think they did. As I recall,
No, I don't think they did either.
I think I think Verizon came in and said that they were going to serve the whole town with FiOS, and then immediately after that, um, Comcast came back and said that they were offering this type of service as a townwide upgrade.
Correct. Right. So
Okay,
Verizon got funding, and Comcast announced the same technology that they proposed to Bourne.
yeah, but was Verizon gap funding, or was it just they said they were going to do that as a a competitive upgrade?
I think it was gap funding. I think Verizon got gap funding for some 7 to 9 towns, something like that.
Okay. Again, my mind
Ver-
is
Verizon bid on Bourne, so
They did, but it didn't come through that's my recollection.
Right.
well, that's a question is if the town withdraws support, MBI could just revert to Verizon. Like I don't see a mechanism by which they couldn't do that as the second bidder
But how's that better? That's
because then
worse, in my opinion.
the second. Well, I think a 10 gig competitor plan is better, but I think a competition is going to still be better than any technological
Right.
improvement.
Well, if Comcast comes in with a technology capable of 10 gig down, Verizon's going to roll out more aggressively. If
I
Comcast
don't.
doesn't come into town, they're going to be less interested.
I think that's kind of um, it's kind of like got the competitive situation backwards. So Comcast has been the only game for such a long time. So even if they upgrade, it doesn't really change the competitive situation to cause someone else to invest to come in.
Verizon, they're doing it already, right? Verizon's rolled out 300 symmetrical all the way to Clay Pond Road, and if they're going to go to Falmouth, they have to do that out at Depot Road. If they're going to do this end, this part of Falmouth up this way.
They don't necessarily, so like it's the same issue Comcast is pointing out. This is very deep into Bourne and far away from the it's far from Depot, it's far from the highway. It's one of the more difficult areas to reach. So I don't think they aren't guaranteed to do anything unless forced to, or they see it as economically desirable. And as we've generally seen, the Cape is not particularly economically desirable given the seasonality of the customer base, the condition of the poles. Um, so I don't, there's no guarantee they're going to do anything except if they, you know, need to or see it's a good idea.
Right, but if Comcast comes in and services those 1,400 broadband service locations, then the only way that Verizon's going to compete there is going to have to be to push their network out that way.
Or they don't come at all is also still a
Yeah, that's
possibility
true,
here.
but you're still going to have DOCSIS 4 in that part of town.
So the thing here is, do we have a preference if we suggest the town to withdraw support for this current plan from Comcast, do we have a preference how the chips should fall afterwards? I think that's what we're discussing here. What's the
Yeah,
better outcome for the town?
yeah, I don't see how that makes things better. Makes things worse. Because
So
those
why would
1,400
competition make
locations continue to be in a backwater.
so if as soon as all of a sudden people wake up and have a second choice and they can switch, Comcast sees customers dropping off, wouldn't they have to upgrade anyway in order to compete?
You mean Comcast?
Yeah, so say Verizon comes in and takes the 1,400 locations, theoretically, I don't know
Well,
completely
yeah,
the
but what if
legal
Verizon
mechanics.
doesn't? What
Well,
if they
it's
don't? Right?
well,
Okay,
co-
can we
MBI
can we
can
go
approach
can we
someone
go back
else.
to
They could,
this actual letter? Because if we're looking at this letter to decide whether we're going to send it to the select board for their signature, and I understand that they're talking about bandwidth limitations. They're a little bit limited right now on what they can apply to this. But perhaps what if I'm hearing all this correctly, what you want to maybe add is something to the effect of to the last sentence, which is we ask that MBI initiate discussions with the town to explain blah blah. Um, these and then say something about this may have implications for our letter of support. And that's all at this point. I think you need to put in this letter for them to be okay to send it because that tells them why we care without making them get too deep in the weeds of technology. When they can come up for air, we can explain that to them later.
yeah, that seems to have been the preference anytime we've interacted directly with the select board on wording
Yes.
is less tech words, and we can always explain it offline, but the minimum, they said the minimum to memorialize uh the overall context of what we're trying to do here.
Uh,
Or
One,
then put that in this in that's in the second to last sentence. We respectfully request that the MBI pause further execution steps with Comcast under the
But
gap grant of
why?
Bourne because this has implications for our letter of support.
I guess. Well, the other point to make, I don't know that at this point, I mean, the letter of support is gone, right?
But it can
the
be,
board, their board has already voted
Right.
on this, as far as I understand.
Oh,
Right. But
they've voted a while ago. It's a discretionary authority, so they're handing authority from the whole department down to a sub piece of the department. So that's a board approval from MBI's board.
right, but
So it's
on the
delegated authority.
call, it sounded to me like that MBI was basically at the end of the call turning over the funding for the 1,400 locations to Comcast.
Well, if we don't want it, we should, if this is not right for the town, we should state that and state to the select board to tell MBI that, and then let MBI figure it out because it's MBI who set this situation up. So that we should never we frankly shouldn't have had to deal with this, but because there was only 16 locations for Gap and Gap was supposed to be a non-event.
Again, my suspicion, my inference is that even the withdrawal of the letter of support isn't going to change the ultimate outcome, which is that Comcast is going to get the funding from MBI. If
Right.
then it just the gap funding will disappear. Okay, Comcast, you don't get $3 million in gap funding. Comcast, come in and negotiate. We're doing town by town, company by company negotiations for BEAD funding without any competitive bidding or any input from the receiving towns. They'll just say, okay, we're done with Gap. Now let's move on to non-competitive grant negotiations under with the remaining BEAD funds.
Yeah,
That again,
MBI is liable to do whatever they want, just like they always have. That's why I think we need to state, what's right for Bourne, let the select board reiterate that if they so choose, and MBI can do what they want. But if we don't object to something that's not right for the town, no one's going to.
Right, but again, I'll state, I think this is the best technology available for the town. You look at what's been made available on Cable Labs specifications, 6 gig up, you're not going to do better than that. You probably never will do better than that on a cable system.
It's we were looking for a competitive provider to bring in 10 gig fiber ideally.
Sure,
Is
but that's never going to happen with Comcast, and who else can do it besides Verizon? And Verizon's already here.
MBI could immediately, under the current terms of BEAD, immediately approach Open Cape and offer these locations to them.
Right, but Open Cape's not going to do residential.
Dude,
They're not going to do it.
We're taking a bad deal is worse than no deal at all here. I think we're losing the opportunity to
Not a bad
finally have
deal.
competition. But it's not what we wanted in the letter of support. It doesn't bring competition.
I think it's
And
better. 6 gig
can
up, that's better than what we asked for.
Can I let me just cut this off before we do a formal submittal of this to the select board and wordsmith this. Let me see if I can sit down with MJ and with Anne Marie and just talk through this and point out that we've got two different opinions here. One is taking a bad deal is worse than getting no deal at all and waiting for other funding to come through. Versus, gee, this is better than what we had, and this is the best that this company, which is the apparent preferred provider of MBI, is all that they're going to is what they're going to give us. Is that a fair statement of the dichotomy here?
So
Yeah.
I don't agree on the tech. So like I sent out the links to what Comcast has actually released and done field trials on and can do. And so I think we got the speeds confused here between what in theory the standard absolutely can do, but versus what how they're deploying it.
Yeah, that's true, but
That is
what they're
true.
deploying today, it's not a limitation of where they can get to eventually. So there's a difference between what can the technology do and what's being deployed. Sure. But I'm saying this is the best technology out there in terms of if you look at what can be deployed, this is the best.
So other providers who have taken up the 1.8 are getting so I think the upload speeds are similar, is what you're saying. So, but it's the down's actually slightly higher on the 1.8 as it's being deployed. So the 1.8 is getting 10 gig plus down, 6 gig plus up, whereas the way Comcast does the FDX 1.2, it at its best, in trial locations where there, very few to no amplifiers, very low splits, everything's perfect basically. The best that they've clocked is 8.5 by 6. And so they've had to stop calling it 10 gig because it's not the way they've got it, even in the best circumstances, can't do 10. So the 1.8 is still slightly faster. It also can be upgraded from there. So, I don't know if calling the 1.2 better than the 1.8, given even the theoretical the deployment limits of tests that they've done. So
Brian, thank you very much for the the pointing out the difference here. But let me just look at an alternative world scenario for a second here. In a perfect world, we would be the board of an MLP for the town of Bourne. Okay, in a perfect world, MBI would say, okay, MLP, go identify all your unserved, underserved, and CAIs, and MBI would give a pot of money to serve those to the town, to the MLP. And the MLP, then we would go out and bid and find, in terms of what we'd expressed as desires in what was in the letter of support, we would go out and entertain bidders who can provide the 1.8 gigahertz technology, and provide some minimum level of service that can be upgraded in the future, either based on a pricing structure to customers or something else. But we're not there. My difficulty here is that uh, the select board recognizes that MBI is frankly calling all of the shots here. They right now have full authority to if they want, they could withdraw the gap funding and then just turn around and say, okay, we're going to go into private negotiations with Comcast, and we're not even going to talk to Open Cape or Verizon. We have to move two very recalcitrant organizations here. One is our uh, select board, just because of their frankly lack of technical knowledge, and two, lack of time to deal with this. And two is MBI, whose preference, at least based expressed on what they've done so far, is to give a lot of money to Comcast. And I'm trying to figure a way that we, who are an advisory board that they give some time to, the select board does, but not a lot of time, is gonna move the needle on those. Correct me if I'm wrong. I just don't see it, how this is going to get out of the select board. They're going to just say, this is, thank you very much, this is annoyance, we'll take it under advisement, and never hear from them again. Pardon my frustration here, but that's kind of the world we're stuck in. Is that an unreasonable representation of where we are?
I think that's very reasonable. I mean, we're kind of stuck here between an ideal dream and what the reality is and what can get done. And Comcast has, they basically are the only provider right now for the majority of homes in Bourne, although it is slowly changing. So the question is, do we roll the dice and tell them no, or do we take a deal which Jed, who's really more the expert in this than anybody else, says is a pretty good deal, assuming that they live up to their promises? That my concern really is, A, are they willing to put this in writing? And how, I mean, let's basically, we talked about the HD upgrades for the Bourne Community Cable system, and they promised that by a certain date, and it wasn't done. So I have to take with a little bit of a grain of salt as to whether or not they're actually going to make this schedule, or what they're willing to put in writing, and what the timetable is. And I'm not sure that that we can entirely trust them. On the other hand, do we have much choice in this matter? Certainly, what they're offering, if they were to come through with it, is not a perfect world, but a decent compromise. And excuse me, I've got the allergies too. And I'm thinking that in terms of what Jed is saying, that makes sense if in fact we can trust them. And I want to know what I wasn't at the meeting, what the impression of you guys was, to whether or not you think that they're honestly going to come through with this, or are we getting a lot of doublespeak and not really promises that can be fulfilled?
Well, we have it in writing already. It's exactly as they put in their grant application, no different.
But are they promising anything more than these 1,400 homes? Because it may be that doing those 1,400 homes, maybe they can, do it at a break-even point, but possibly supplying this technology to the rest of the homes in the area may not be something that's financially in their best immediate interest. I don't know.
We don't have the 1,800 homes in writing. We have the technology for the 4 locations in writing in the grant application. It's MBI who is assigning BEAD eligible locations under GAP. So we have the tech in writing. We don't have the locations in outside of the 4 in writing.
Well, that is,
The
they committed to it on the call. Comcast did,
and
and
they
they
will
committed to
have to
doing more
enter
than
into
those
some,
locations.
and they'll have to put in that memorialize those other 1,400 locations in a contract that gets approved by the board, which then becomes public record. My just a thought here is that when that becomes public, we reiterate the technology very briefly for the select board. Again, we're writing on behalf of the select board. Ask them to should say, and based on our conversations on May 1, once you complete or during the completion of this contract by December 31st, 26, you will at the same time or shortly after begin offering extending the rest of this technology to the rest of the town of Bourne. We now request you to give us a timeline for when that is going to be done.
Too late. So if we go down that road, there is no way to fix this. So there's no appetite to litigate over a contract if they don't meet the terms of it. There's no alternative play if we extend this any further. Frankly, we should have withdrawn the support weeks ago, months ago, because it would have put us in a easier position to direct these into another provider's hands with more time. So any further delay from moving on from this deal makes it so no one else can get funding to complete this.
My inference of all of this is that no one else will ever get funding through MBI for the town of Bourne, other than Comcast and maybe some for Open Cape. I won't say it's necessarily wired, but MBI is clearly very comfortable with what Comcast has proposed for the gap funding. And should any more money be available through BEAD, et cetera, they will start negotiating with Comcast. And only if those negotiations fail will they move on to the only other real provider here, which is Verizon.
So then we need to update this letter to be clear.
I'm unclear on how to revise this. Again, my suggestion is uh, uh, that we attempt to make a revision of this and revisit it. Let's get this done quickly. I would suggest it next week. But in the meantime, I would like to talk to MJ and to Anne Marie just to see what's the likelihood of the select board even considering this in the near future. Because
It's any further delay though makes this it continues to close the door on other options that this not having nipped this in the bud back in January.
understood, but having talked to knowing what happened after the appropriation to fix the roof, they're working 14 hours a day scrambling to try to figure out where to come up with the money to make the repairs, given that there are no on the roof of the police station, given that there are no other immediate options to do this. So again, this is they're just not going to have the time to even consider this. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't get to this until well into June or maybe July.
What was
That's
it? Wasn't there a deadline? I thought sometime that either the letter had to be withdrawn or not. I thought that was coming up. So I'm
Well,
confused
based on
about
the meeting, it's gone.
that. Okay.
I mean, that was the implication that they gave us.
So really, what you're saying is we've already committed to it, essentially.
Well, no. So MBI forced this on us, and then is now trying to force us to take it, even though, as we found out, the technology is no different than the grant application. So, this is just par for the course with dealing with MBI, trying to get people to take the easier deal for them to execute. So, so what if it's past deadlines or whatever? We should have known about this a year and a half ago, that this was a possibility. We could have written a different support letter knowing that this was a possibility. We might not have written a support letter at all, knowing that this was a possibility to be here. So deadlines, they're entirely created by the problem, and the deadlines are always created here, for us to deal with, and towns barely have the capacity to deal with this anyway. And MBI knows this and puts us in these predicaments. So what if there's a supposed deadline? MBI can stop this if they want to.
But if there isn't actually a deadline other than just what they imply, then it might be worth it just to get it on the record.
Yeah, I agree. So they'll do whatever they want, and the deadlines are all made up by MBI. I think we have to raise our objections, and they'll do what they want with that.
Well, is what you're saying is that they've already essentially received the grant or received approval for the grant? Is that MBI has basically already decided that it's going to be Comcast if they are able to meet the conditions of the original of their original promises?
That's what they said on the call. Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
they basically, after the call, we're going to go and finalize the contract.
So that's why we need to raise objections as quickly as possible, because any delay here makes this harder.
Would there be some
Again,
way we could put in this letter to just basically say, right, as Wendy's going to put, that to make this acceptable to us, they would have to be willing to say that they will upgrade the entire town to this technology.
They did say that, John. They've already
Right.
said that.
Not so that's why we can't even we have to close the door here on the negotiations with Comcast. There's no more room to negotiate over this. We have to, the door has to get closed. Otherwise, this drags on forever and nothing gets solved. So that's what's been happening, is it's dragging on forever, and we're not reaching a deal that everyone's comfortable with. And I think it's just, we need to close the door on further negotiations and move on to other providers.
well, the difficulty is I don't think they're going to move on to other providers. They're just going to,
Right, there are no other providers.
they're just going to,
These locations become BEAD, so MBI can negotiate with other providers for this, because these are originally BEAD locations. MBI took them out and put them in a gap. When they're defaulted on a gap, they end up back in BEAD, and then MBI can directly negotiate, since round 2 is direct negotiation round.
which will then be negotiating with Comcast. I have no doubt that they will then go back to Comcast, and then unless something is really unacceptable to MBI, with lip service to us, frankly, with lip service to the town of Bourne, they will then negotiate a sole source contract under the BEAD funding with Comcast. Does anybody see anything else happening there? Jed, I just don't see any other way forward.
Right,
Well, but the thing is that we can't, they'll probably try, and we could still raise objections again when they try to do that. Or we just put the objections up front so that we don't have to rehash this discussion.
We can get
We,
our objections on record to the select board, who will then say, yes, thank you for your objections, and put them in a file or defer to some further time. We will then be on record. I mean, the minutes from this meeting are going to show that we're on record about this.
correct.
That memorializes it. That's public record. I can alert uh, the members of the select board about this and say, if you we can do this. We're doing this in writing, and one recommendation is to withdraw the letter of support, which will uh, eliminate the gap funding, and revert that money and the discussion back to a sole source negotiation by MBI with someone about BEAD funding. And at that point, we have whatever control we had at this point is totally reverted to MBI, and hoping that they negotiate with other companies and get bids from other companies. Right now, I think is not realistic. That's my personal opinion.
They don't need to get bids in a direct negotiation round. They say, do you want it at similar terms that you've offered on other towns?
Yes,
So
and give us the price. Okay, you know,
yeah.
um, do your network design and give us the price, and we'll tell you how much money of that we can give you. How much money from the bead pot we can give you, given that this is happening and will be happening in multiple towns.
And another question I would raise is, does the state actually have the BEAD money right now? And if not, I mean, from what I've been reading, and Wendy circulated something very interesting on the Bourne Facebook site regarding the clawback of certain, I believe it was BEAD funding for certain groups. Um, so I don't know. In other words, if you were to delay here, what are the chances that maybe the money will go away altogether if if the current federal government decides to pull back on the funding and just well, it hasn't been awarded yet. We're clawing back on it. Everyone should do something else. As we've heard, for instance, the idea of pushing forward with the idea of satellite technology, for instance. So
That's a definite possibility. Get what we can now under contract, and get our congressional delegation to force Secretary Lutnick, to issue those contracts and fund them, or honor the fact that they will reimburse the state once those contracts are let. That's where the funding is. Or do we say, well, we'll wait and we'll go under BEAD funding, and then have any uncommitted funds be clawed back by the federal government? I think that's what
and
you're
there is
saying,
there
John.
is talk of that now. I mean, there is
Yeah.
talk of that now, and it's an area which could be vulnerable. I really don't understand quite about how the congressional appropriations work, and whether or not they can be pulled back. But I know that uncommitted funds are in deeper trouble than funds that are already committed. So,
Sure. So, but what can we do? I mean, that doesn't affect anything we do, John.
well, no, but in terms of the fact that if we move forward more quickly, possibly funding will be there and will be distributed before anything happens. So before it can be clawed back. Whereas if we delay the process, we take the chance of
But
losing.
we're not delaying the process. The process has already gone forward. MBI and Comcast have already negotiated a contract.
Well, Jed, I think the option that Brian is talking about is we withdraw the letter of support. MBI then withdraws or cancels any contracts under GAP with Comcast, and then reverts that funding, and the service to those under and unserved locations, diverts that back into their sole source negotiation period with the BEAD funds, and
Sure, but that's a delay,
that
right? That
exactly
slows things down.
that slows things down,
Right.
because BEAD does not have that time limit, have the
Right.
2-year time limit.
Do
Um,
is there no advantage to letting them know that we're not just going to roll over and say, "Oh, well, they proposed that. Oh, so we should just take that." Because then what have we done any of this for if we're just going to take
right.
their word for it?
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
gotta, I think you've got to
Well, we're
put up
not
some
taking, there's
resistance,
going to
even
be a
if
contract.
I
We're not
think
taking,
I think you have to put up some form of memorialized resistance to this, even if it's futile. What's the worst that could happen? We're stuck with what they're proposing anyway. But it just might
Well,
be.
no, we could
No,
not
worse.
get it. No, we would get less.
Right.
Yeah, but the locations wouldn't be blocked from future programs because they've now been identified as
Right,
unserved.
but
Right.
the future programs are just gonna go back to Comcast.
Right. Verizon
Well,
can bid on
Maybe.
some of this
we,
stuff.
we may have to raise objections year after year after year. That's a real possibility because otherwise it seems the
Yeah,
state
so
will do the easiest thing that they can do.
Why not say if you're going to, rather than say other providers, say additional providers.
but there aren't any. I mean, that's the
There
problem here. I
there
think we have to
might
recognize
be.
that there aren't going to be any other providers.
So, the terms of
I didn't
the
know that.
BEAD negotiation round was it didn't have to be people that bidded on the town. They were going to start with bidders from across the state, any of them, and then, but also anybody else who wanted to become a qualified bidder became an option. So it could literally be anybody, but realistically, it's going to be, places adjacent towns that were bid on bidders are going to be approached first since similar poles, similar topography, they're already got the backhaul to the general vicinity. So you're looking at Verizon, you're looking at Open Cape. There was like
Oh,
one or two oddballs in the list
no,
for round one bidders.
but
Re-
Open Cape's not an option.
Haven't asked.
They're not an option for residential. I mean,
Why not?
Why not?
Steve told us. He's told us that at the meeting that we had when they were when we did the letter of support for Open Cape. He said he's not doing residential.
And they don't have a business model to
They
do
don't.
that,
They're not
and
going to
that's what
do it.
they've told me.
Right.
He's told me a couple of
Right.
times, as has a couple of his other. I can't remember the woman's name, but she said right now they're not set up to do residential.
Right.
So it's
They're only doing
Comcast or
it.
Verizon. That's it. And if
Right.
we're going to pull the plug on Comcast, it doesn't make sense because Verizon's already here.
And the thing is, if the chips fall to Verizon, they can do it under. I think in theory they can do it under GAP, and then we don't have to worry about the whole BEAD issue.
I
It's a
still
different
don't,
funding
right,
source.
but there's no upside to that. Verizon's here already.
But they're not in this chunk of Bourne that we proved under the BEAD challenge to
That's
be
true.
unserved.
That's true.
Right. I must say, looking at Verizon's deployment on over in Sagamore, again they're using that wire house right on the town border of Bourne. It's actually in Bourne, and they're deploying east into Sandwich, at a very rapid pace. Um, those I've had a lot of opportunity to go back and forth to Sandwich down Route 6A, and there is an awful lot of Verizon activity being put what I would guess is a middle mile backbone down 6A through Sandwich. And I'm presuming I know that they got a gap grant for Sandwich, and I'm presuming that's the backbone that they intend to serve, and maybe go beyond that.
Am
Um,
I at
Yeah.
the meeting?
So, Bob, I don't have time to continue here. I mean, we've been over an hour on this.
okay,
Um,
well,
I-
again, I don't think we have any consensus on Brian. I'm just going to entertain that letter as uh, basically a motion to approve this letter and send it to the select board for forwarding on. And at this point, do I hear a second for sending this letter to the select board?
which letter are we
Just
talking
what
about?
one question
Brian,
with I've made some edits and they're live on the screen. Should I include them or just leave it as sent last night?
Well, no, if we're going to do the letter, then we have to fix it.
I made a couple of small editing additions, which I sent to Brian
but
as a direct message.
Right, but what
okay,
you should say, it says the proposed plan appears to limit 2 gig to 2 meg up. However, the technology is capable of doing 6 gig up and 10 gig down. which is as good as any, and it's going to be deployed townwide.
Will they commit to that
Yes, they did.
in writing?
Yes, they have committed to deploying that technology townwide as part of the project that they're doing.
They, as an alternative, suppose we memorialize what they committed to in the meeting. Jed and I prepare
Yeah,
a
There
letter,
you go.
and then ask, in addition to the deadline of December of 2026, can we ask that Comcast provide us with a timeline for deployment to the rest of the town?
Firm
It's
timeline.
just gonna, so we don't have it in writing now. But where do we have in writing the technology you're saying they're gonna deploy? Because beyond the gap grant.
it's in the letter.
What letter?
So in the letter of support, we said that they cannot go forward without deploying the technology townwide.
We
So where
didn't
is
have a
Comcast written down beyond what they put in the gap grant, the technology that you're saying is capable of more?
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
I-
So the
Jed, what
problem
I'm
is
suggesting is you and I write a letter um, for consideration by the select board that memorializes exactly what we heard, and then specifically asks we ask that you provide us with a timeline for when the unserved areas beyond those served under GAP are going to be served.
Yeah,
Make
for
make
that.
that a firm timeline because
Yeah,
they
we want a
they
firm
didn't say
timeline for the rest
anything.
of the town.
the risk though is we delay and we again don't get anything accomplished by delaying here because
I don't know that we're delaying. No, we're not delaying any. I'm saying le- let's just ask them for a commitment beyond what they're already proposing to do. Anyway,
A time, basically, it's a time commitment. It's a commitment to deploy this technology, initially providing this, but capable of providing a higher level of service, and deployment with this initial technology and service to the entire town by X.
yeah, I'm gonna have to go, guys.
Okay,
This is well beyond what I had planned for today. I gotta
Yep.
be out of here
okay,
at 10:30. So we gotta do
okay.
something here.
Okay, Jed, I'm gonna just go ahead and you and I will write that letter if that's okay.
Sure,
I need you on it to because you and I were the ones at that meeting.
sure.
Okay, and I'm gonna just in terms of I'll get together with an agenda, but since this letter is hot, I would like to convene another meeting next week, maybe
Okay.
to consider only this letter, and I'll prepare the agenda for that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay,
Just for the record, I have a commitment for next Thursday morning, so I would not be able to be there. If we could do Wednesday, I could be around, but unfortunately, I have a live in-person meeting 9 o'clock next Thursday morning.
I will poll everybody about an appropriate time to hold a meeting to consider only this letter from the select board to Comcast with a copy to MBI.
when is the
Sounds
next
Okay.
good.
select board meeting?
The next select board meeting is
June 3rd.
June 3rd.
And it's not clear we're gonna get on that agenda. If
That's
we
why,
want, even if we wanted to, I don't think there's much agenda availability till July.
that's what I said.
Okay, I can do
Yeah.
Wednesday. You know,
Okay.
whatever
Well,
works for everybody.
I have to check my calendar because I've got
Yeah, and
my
I
wife's got
can't do
a
Wednesday. I'm not here
I
Wednesday.
will find an appropriate time and I will we don't we'll have a draft submitted, but let me find an appropriate time. I'll poll everybody. But Jed has to be out the door right now, so
Yeah, I gotta go. See you
okay.
next time,
Bye,
everybody.
Jed. See ya.
Let me get my agenda back up here. I lost it. Where did it go? Um Essentially, can we, again, this is a long time over a very important subject, but can we defer the rest of this agenda to a next regular meeting, a couple of weeks down the line or right before the June 3rd select board meeting?
I second that motion.
Okay. So we're deferring the rest of this agenda. The two items, we are going to have a full meeting. I don't have the calendar right in front of me, but that's going to be something like um, the week of Memorial Day. I'm not
It could be the
absolutely sure.
29th.
The 29th.
Yeah.
And we will try to turn this letter around in a short meeting next week, time to be determined. Okay?
Very good.
Okay, with that, I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn us today.
I'm
So
sorry,
moved.
I'm just trying to figure out real quickly, when are we coming back to review this letter that you and Mr. Frank are gonna do?
Well, right now I don't have my calendar in front of me. My wife has a medical appointment that's been shifted 3 times for a morning next week,
Uh-huh.
and I've got to catch up with Cape Cod Hospital and find out when that is. And that's going to be an entire morning for me. Um, and
Okay.
uh, uh, and she's not here right now.
And that's fine. I'll just try for to be determined. The
To be
remainder
determined. It'll
and
be
and the remainder of the agenda goes till the regular meeting on May 29th. Is
on May
that
29th, prior to
okay?
the next select board meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
But again, if we get this letter in for consideration and discussion with the select board early on, I'm sure I'm going to get phone calls from at least two, maybe three of the select board members asking about this.
Great.
Right.
Maybe they'll learn something.
Okay, but and more, more time in front of the select board and explaining things to them is always worthwhile. And the more
Stuff is
time they have to think
complicated, that's
about it,
for sure. Yeah.
the more
So
time
more
they have, exactly. The more time they have to think about it, the better consideration we'll get when it finally does hit the agenda.
Yep.
Okay. And with that, I'll do a vote to John made a motion to adjourn, I guess, right?
Yes.
Second, somebody?
Second.
Wendy seconds. Okay. John,
Aye.
Wendy,
Aye.
Brian,
aye.
and Bob, the chair says aye. Okay, thank you very much. Very, very complex set of negotiations, and we don't have a crystal ball to figure where we're going, but we'll certainly give it a shot. Thank you,
We will.
folks.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.